it's sub 20. Like the goal is to break 20 hours, but I'm not looking at it like that. I'm sort of looking at it like, what's the ultimate potential? Like, what is humanly possible over these 3 days with everything going to the plan that we want it to go.
Hey, welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast. I am your host, Jackie Tan, and it is so good to have you here today. This show is all about human performance, whether that's sports performance or showing up as your best every single day. We cover the body's incredible ability to heal, adapt, and evolve so you can crush limitations, reconnect your body and mind, and discover your extraordinary potential. So how incredibly fitting that we launch season 3 with someone who is constantly pushing the boundaries of what the human body and mind can achieve. He is the Ultraman world champion and world record holder, Richard Thompson. And for those of you who don't know what an Ultraman is, let me quickly break it down for you. Ultraman is a 3-day, 515-kilometer annual endurance race divided into 4 stages over 3 days. Day 1 is a 10-kilometer swim followed by a 140-kilometer bike ride. Day 2, a 281-kilometer bike ride. And day 3 is a double marathon, an 84.3-kilometer run. Now, what I love about this episode is that whilst you may think the conversation will be all about deconstructing a world record Ultraman preparation, it's so much more than that. Richard shares how he got started into triathlons, his journey to Ultraman, and the work and incredible team it takes to not only become the world champion and world record holder, but also his extraordinary goal of completing a sub-20 Ultraman. The Kangaroo Sub20 challenge will push Richard physically, mentally, and emotionally, and we dive deep into what it really means to push the physical and mental boundaries in discovering your extraordinary potential. We also talk about T0 Multisport, which is his coaching business, and how he and his team are helping athletes all over the world achieve their goals. He's described as one of the greatest endurance athletes of all time. This is one of my favorite conversations. Enjoy this episode with Ultraman world record holder, Richard Thompson. Richard, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. But I've got to admit, it was only a couple of months ago that I even found out what Ultraman was. And it's through a couple of clients of mine, and I'm helping them with their recovery. And they're being coached by you, and who better to be coached by than the world champion and record holder?
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about your story is that you started triathlons, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you started after school, which you were rubbish at. Those are your words. You came last in your first event. And then fast forward 2017, you're, become world record holder on your debut, and then 2019 world champion. And it's just such an incredible achievement. And not only have you achieved incredible things, but you're helping others achieve great things as well through your coaching. And so I thought to start this off, if you could give us some background as to how you got into triathlons, why, and then eventually getting into the Ultraman.
Yeah, I think my background is probably a little bit different to most kids or adolescents going into the sport. I did team sports throughout school. I was marginally overweight and didn't really enjoy running at all. And then out into uni, I thought I'd need to get a bit fitter, and found triathlon And as you said, yeah, the first race I did, I was dead last in my age group, and full of confidence though. I genuinely thought I was going to win that race, which is hilarious. But um, the confidence is never lost on me. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that it was different. I enjoyed that it was an individual sport in the sense that I'd done team sports throughout my entire life up to that point, and so really enjoyed the idea that the more you put in yourself, the pretend, hopefully the rewards would prevail as a result. So you're not reliant on anyone else in the team pulling their weight. So that was really enjoyable, that aspect. And I didn't really have any big goals, I don't think, in terms of, I see a lot of athletes obviously come through the coaching side of things, and they've got some amazing goals and aspirations. And it's probably because I was so new in the sport and I was just sort of cutting my teeth, but I didn't have any expectations about where I wanted to go with it. I knew that I really enjoyed the training, and I really enjoyed, I guess, just improving. Like it's so enjoyable seeing that you can, there's because you're against the clock for most of it, and sometimes there's course conditions and weather conditions that change that. But primarily there's so much data and training that whether or not you're improving, and so I really enjoyed that. And then it was from 17 at last at a sprint triathlon in Brisbane to then I went to Ironman eventually, because I was a pretty poor swimmer, and so the longer the distance triathlon, the least the swim has a big deal, has a less impact on the overall result, I guess. So I found that, and I was stronger on the bike, which again lended itself to Ironman racing. But it took me a number of goes to qualify for Hawaii, and I know that's a big goal for a lot of Ironman athletes, is to qualify for the Ironman World Championships. I think the first time I did it, I missed out on one spot. The second time I did it, I missed out on one spot again. And then the third time I was studying law and accounting at uni, and I put that on hold, I think, or I went really close to maybe one subject for 6 months, and went all in on this idea of wanting to qualify for Hawaii. And we did that. And at 22, so that was, we qualified at 22 and raced in Hawaii in 23 at 23 years of age, and was very fortunate to win the 18 to 24 age group at the Ironman World Championships. What would have been 7 years after coming last. So
That's brilliant.
No, 6 years. 6 years after coming last. So. But it's interesting looking back at it, I think, because at no point was I, in that 6 year period of time, was I thinking that's where I'm headed. Because I didn't, not that I never would put a ceiling on that, but it certainly wasn't on the radar at any one time. It was just so focused on wanting to improve and the curiosity around that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love. It's almost like you loved the process, rather, or that's what the focus, and rather than that end goal.
Totally. And that was instilled on me, I think, by osmosis more than anything, very early on in my athletic career. But and then I took some time out from the sport to practice law, and realized I did that for 5 years with some success, and I realized that wasn't my jam, and I knew that coaching was. I got a lot out of that, about helping others achieve, things that they may not think was possible themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think, and then I think that was, on reflection, I think that was because the way that my journey was, it was like I was a hack, and I still look at myself as an absolute hack, right? Like it doesn't this. And so therefore you get to the realization that you can achieve anything you want in your life as long as you get the right steps, you do the right steps well. And so the idea, I didn't feel like I was able to do that as a lawyer, to impact as many people as I could, or on a level that I wanted to. And so, but coaching it was, so it was a pretty obvious in terms of when people say follow your passion, or at least try to make your work your passion. That was a pretty easy step. So, and then in 2016, I hadn't done triathlon for a number of years, and I thought it's time to. It was 2015. It's time to get back into fitness and see what I could do as a 30-year-old, and found Ultraman, and there's no way that I was going to swim 10 kilometers. That was far too. I knew that it existed, but I was like you. I had no idea. Like it was only a very new concept in Australia, and the idea of swimming 10 kilometers on day one, let alone everything else,
Exactly.
was huge for me. But we broke that down, and we were like, all right, let's give it a go.
Wow. Simply put, let's give it a go.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
So
yeah.
where do you even start with that then? A 10-kilometer swim.
Yeah, so for the distances for everyone that doesn't know about it, I guess it's a sport that's been going on for 40 years, and primarily in Hawaii in November is the World Championships each year. But there are races around the world, one of which is at Noosa every May, and the distance, the 10-kilometer ocean swim, immediately followed by a 145-kilometer bike ride. That's day one. Day two is a 275-kilometer bike ride, a time trial. And day three is a double marathon, 84.4-kilometer run. So it's it's quite the exercise, but it's easily the most rewarding thing I think anyone. Well, I think in triathlon certainly, like it's a beautiful sport.
Is it?
Okay, I'll try to sell this to you only because so in every other triathlon, every other 1 day triathlon event, you for the most part you've got your team, and everyone has their own team, whether it's their family or their physio or their masseuse, and they've got all these, and their coach obviously, and they get you to the start line, and whatever the distance is, and it's up to you then to get to the finish line. There may be people around the side, on the side of the road cheering and encouraging, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. And cognitively, it's up to you as well. You've got to make really good decisions at the relevant times, which in itself is a beautiful aspect of Ironman racing, I think. When you are doing enormous distances in Ironman for over 1 day, and you're cognitively not great with 15 kilometers to run, but you've got to make really good decisions about nutrition, hydration, and intensity. That in itself is a tall ask for anybody. But for Ultraman, the key difference, there's two key differences, I think. One is obviously the ability to recover. So because of the 3-day aspect, you need to be able to control your fatigue and also your sort of endorphins over those 3 days. It's not like, you get to the awards party of the triathlon and you'll have someone who's won the race, who's in a wheelchair, and someone who's in second, who's bounding up the stairs, but no one cares because it's all just that 1 day, right? Whereas you can't just be all in on day one for Ultraman.
Exactly.
You've got to be able to control it. I think more so your emotional state than anything else. You can't get too excited. But then, so the recovery aspect and what you do outside of the event, like when you're not racing, let's say you finish at 3 p.m. on day one, you've got until 6 a.m. the next morning up to yourself, to your own devices. So what you do between 3 p.m. and 6 a.m. is so critically important as to how you perform the next day. So breaking that down is really important and something that's obviously unique to the sport. And the other aspect, which I think which makes it, is that it's a team sport in the sense that you have to follow the road rules all the time, and the organizers don't give you any aid or support. So you've got a car behind you, a support car, filled with 4 people of your own choosing, and they basically follow you around the course, giving you food, water, whatever you want, throughout those 3 days. And so without them, you wouldn't be able to do what you're able to do. But more importantly, I think that if you get that right, if you get that combination of teamwork right, and there's a process that I go down in that respect as well, that you are able to basically, I think, if you do it well enough, you can delegate as much as you can so that cognitively you're not making any decisions throughout those 3 days. You're just like a robot being
Yeah.
told what to do, what to eat, when to drink it. And as a result of that, like, you don't have that gray matter in your head as to whether or not this is good, bad, or indifferent, or who's up the road, or how am I going on time, or anything. You're just being told what to do. And so I've found that the performance as a result of that from me as an athlete is so much more higher than I even thought possible come both the race days. So we were able to go to Australia on debut with my 4 guys in the car who are like my best mates. We delegate roles. My driver is Nick Renato, who is this perfect, like, real ochre Australian, but perfect combination of like road rage and separation anxiety. Like, you're just the perfect driver you want. And then my best mate, Nick Quinn, he's in the front seat. He's an engineer by trade. He's the guy that's doing all the sums on data, heart rate, speed, pace, he's basically the race controller, but telling me exactly how hard to push or whether I need to back off over those 3 days. We've got Steve in the back, who is an accountant who has this most amazing Excel spreadsheet, who he basically documents every gram of carbohydrate that I consume over 3 days and delivers that to me every half hour. And then the fourth seat is essentially support and helping everyone else along the way. So it's a really tight group, but it's because of that, as I said, that we were able to go to Australia in 2017 on debut, break the world record, which is just so bonkers for us, by about 10 minutes. And that still stands. That record still stands. And it's 21 a cumulative time of 21 hours and 21 minutes over 3 days of racing. And there's been a couple of good attempts around the world that have missed it by 5 or 6 minutes. And then we went to Hawaii the next year for the World Championships in 2018. And we brought everyone over there, the whole crew, my family, basically whoever played a key role in that success in the Noosa. We took them over to Hawaii and tried to do it in really unforgiving environment. And we were lucky enough to win that by almost an hour. So it was good.
That's so incredible. And I want to definitely talk about your A team for sure. But before we do, you mentioned obviously, the world record, and it still stands.
Yep.
But that's not enough, because you're attempting to break that. The Kangaroo Sub20 challenge. Tell us about this incredible journey that you're currently on.
Yeah, so I thought I was done after the World Championships in 2018. I was like, I sold everything, right? Everything in my garage. I was like, I'm done with this. Like, there's not much else that I wasn't motivated. And then Nick Quinn, my best mate, was like, maybe 9 months later, and I'm one of those people that will literally not turn a pedal or go for a run if I'm not training.
Yeah,
I don't miss it. And he's like, how fast do you think you could go? Like, in Australia.
He's just dangling that little.
He is. Honestly. And and I was like, well, if everything was to plan, if it was my full-time job, I didn't have to worry about too much else other than that. And some really good equipment choices and a long lead time to prepare for it. I reckon we could maybe break 20 hours, which is sort of like almost an hour and a half off our time. And that was scary, writing that down, or at least coming to that position. But we were like, okay, let's do that. And so we, and it's been this drawn out affair now, because it was meant to be done in 2021. And then That was then COVID hit, so then we couldn't do that, and then it was meant to be in next weekend, which is when the race is in May this year. But we've got we have a documentary getting made about it now, and so they wanted a whole extra year of filming, which was fine. And I was a little bit run injured later in last year, so it was music to my ears that I had a bit more extra time up my sleeve to prepare. And so now it's basically in 12 months' time, May 23, we try to break 20 hours, which you break that down. I don't know whether there's many triathlon boffins that are listening, but you break that down and it's about a 125 per 100 pace for 10K. It's about an average of about 40 kilometers an hour for the bike for 420 kilometers and that's got about 3,500 meters of gain. And based on that, it's about a 6.5 hour double marathon. So 3:15 marathon up, 3:15 marathon back. So it's I sort of feel like I really wanted to go after something that was what I would look back on objectively and think that's a really good outcome. That's a really good performance, because I'm very critical on myself and very critical on my performance, and I know that time of 21 hours and 21 minutes is not that great.
Even though you're the only one in the world who's done that.
I'm the only one that's mentally like insane enough to do it, right? But I acknowledge that there are some extremely good triathletes in the world, and they just don't want or they don't care to go over to that sort of distance. So I'm the motivation was, let's put a performance down that would be up there with all-time good performances in triathlon. So that was the motivation.
Wow. Okay, well let's break this down a bit, because I'd love to know, what actually it is that you're doing to achieve this, but also because obviously you've done this twice before and you've pulled out really incredible performances. Are you replicating that? Like, what's different now for your prep for Sub20 compared to the last two times? Or not much and just go faster?
It's really different. Okay. It's and obviously like the physical side is pretty boring, I think, because not only like the numbers that we were hitting in 2017, I'm already well beyond them, and it's the physical side is pretty. I'm happy to endure anything physically, and so I guess more lead time as a general sense that we were able to prepare. In 2017, I think we had 3 months to prepare before, because I was late. Didn't enter that race until late. It was all sold out, and I was on the wait list. And so I got the call up in January that I'd be racing, and so we had to prepare.
Shit, better prepare.
Yeah, 100%. And I was so close in pulling out my entry at that point, because it was getting close, and I was doing nothing, because it's hard to train for something you're not sure you're going to do. So there was only 3 months there, and then Hawaii for the World Champs was probably 6 months or 5 months worth of all-in training. So to have 15, 18 months is just incredible. So the process, I guess, on a physical level is to go, like I was saying to you before, is to dial back everything that we do to first principles and not be so proud or check your ego at the door, and to go, okay, let's be an amateur again. Let's learn how to run as efficiently as possible and not create any deficiencies that could cause injury or that could cause us to go slower. And same with the bike. How efficient can we make this pedal stroke, or how efficient can we make this position in the aerodynamic position? And obviously swimming, there's a plethora of it's all technique in the pool, but to getting those, we've got the time to get those small things right, as well as recovery, right? Really, really honing in on the recovery side of things to test and retest. And it's all I'm doing at the moment is to working out what works for me in recovery. But so that's the physical side, and it's interesting, but it's very I find it very it's ones and zeros, or it's at least it's very objective, right? We're either doing it or we're not, or it's yes, it's working or it's not. It's very clear cut. The space to grow, like the serious space to grow, which is very different to the last two attempts, is I think the mindset approach and how we go about that. Because first time we did it, we had no expectations. We had no real idea. We wanted to win the race. Maybe the world record would be there. Not sure. And it was, so that was great. But it was so new. We had no idea what we were expecting. And then world championships, like any world championships in any sport, you don't really care about the time. You just want to win the race and claim that title. And so, and that year the course had changed because the volcano had erupted and taken out a little bit of the course, the original course. So that became a much more difficult course in itself. So time became even more irrelevant. But so the mindset was, let's get as fit as possible to win this race. Whereas here, it's like it's sub-20. Like the goal is to break 20 hours, but I'm not looking at it like that. I'm sort of looking at it like, what's the ultimate potential? What is humanly possible over these 3 days with everything going to the plan that we want it to go? And I have no idea. And I think the more you open your mind to that, and that's the really uncomfortable part for me, in the sense that it's like, okay, we're not going to try to win this or beat somebody else, get a title, or we're not just trying to beat my world record time, or we're not even just trying to beat 20 hours. It's like, where is the end point here? And what you have to do then is to strip back yourself as a person. Like I talk about going back to first principles physically in the 3 disciplines, but going back to first principles is who you are as a person and what you're made, like what you stand for, what you're made up of, how that relationship is to yourself, and what, going back to the genesis of why you're doing it, and to be really clear on that. They're really confronting questions, and not something that I've had to really consider in 20 years of racing, because the goal has been so external. Whereas now it's like, we need to go find what's truly possible. And to do that, you need to go real into your sort of heart space to know, I think mentally and spiritually, like what is possible, what's holding you back from getting that extra bit of training done, or that extra effort, or it's a lot of work.
When did you realize that had to be a part of this process? Like, do you start the physical side of things, you're doing all this training, and then you're like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Like, when did you realize you really had to get to the bottom of who you are, what you stand for? And did you figure that out?
So we went about this process and training, just the regular physical training, going, let's go be really fast. And so we went through that process initially, and I kept coming up against a brick wall, metaphorically, in terms of doubt, insecurity, and general motivation. And everything was ahead of me. Like, everything was mapped out, everything, I've got the most amazing team of sponsors and all of this, but it just wasn't happening. And then it was a process of going, well, it was a process of going internally and going, well, where's that blockage happening? And that's when it was very obvious to me to go, okay, this is a journey into self, and this understanding that I probably haven't had a great relationship with myself for many years. And that has to have, and I believe, like a lot of athletes will, and certainly in the past, an athlete would come to me, and at T0, we're very focused on the why. Like, why do you do something? Why is that your goal? And my why, I guess, like people will throw out ideas of like, oh, I'm doing it to make my kids proud, or I'm doing it because you know my best friend can't, or I'm doing it to for whatever reason. But and that's great, that's motivating, and there's a lot of people I think train in anger, race in anger, or want to see how tough they are mentally. Um, and there's this whole idea of mental toughness, like it's a um, I don't know, like it's some, I guess, masculine or macho sort of
Mm,
trait to have, and
aggressive.
yeah, aggressive
Mm,
trait to have, um, and people look at me to think, oh man, you're how mentally strong are you to be able to endure it? But my and it's for me, physical endurance, to endure something physically is no problem. I don't have an issue with that. But it's going through this process of internal reflection and to really answer those difficult questions about self shows to me that true high performance in anything that we do has to come from a place where you're the best relationship that you have is with yourself, and that you're doing what you're doing primarily for you. Because if you can serve yourself at your highest level, then you are going to be the very best that you can be for the people around you, your family, your friends, your work. Um, and I mean, there is that whole adage of, the mask come down the airplane and you've got to put your mask on first before you help your child or before you help others. And it's similar to that, I guess, but it's more so to go, you've got to, this has to come from a genuine place of from within, and a place of, I guess, self-love and self-respect. And that's what you want. You want to achieve this for you first and foremost. And if it's not that, then the performances are going to drop. Like, you're not going to have the motivation long term. You're not going to, and particularly, you're not going to be able to confront this idea that this goal that we have, there is no like, there is not a particular point of time where, or in terms of performance, or the clock will stop where I'll be going, yeah, that's my true potential. If I can't be at the start line really connected with myself, and that this performance is for me. And so, and I don't think, and I think for the vast majority of people, I don't think have got relationships that can be improved with themselves. If people are struggle with comparing with others, or they get jealous from others' success, or um, they struggle to, they've got too much on their plate and they don't know how to, whether or not they feel guilty about doing things for themselves. Or I just think that where there's doubt and insecurity with anyone internally, there's always work to be done on your relationship with yourself. And so, yeah, it's certainly been obvious to me that the more I work into that space, man, like, not only the training gets easier, not only the performance gets better, but every interaction that I have in my world, in my sphere, is so much better and so much more lovely. And it's a really wonderful place to be.
yeah, absolutely. And do you think, or do you feel like, is this something that is always a practice for you, like from now on? Or is it like you've reached a certain point, you are truly happy in yourself, what you stand for, what you believe in, and that's it? Or is this a constant practice for you in and outside of
No, I think
training?
yeah, no, I think it's very much a constant work, and I don't think I'm there at all. I think I'm just at the beginning of this journey in
Yeah.
terms of that development of self, but that relationship with self. But like any relationship, whether it be a co-worker, your business, your someone who's a shareholder of your business, family member, kids, the relationship is ongoing. You have to feed that. It's an ongoing
Mm,
necessity to feed and to cultivate and to care for. And so there's no end position. It's not like, all right, at some point I'm going to have a great relationship with myself. You don't
yeah.
you don't look at that as. I think, especially with in any relationship, you've got to work hard at that. And yeah, there's no finish line. You've never made it. It's always
Yeah.
this continual work. And so,
Yeah.
but I guess my point is that you can't be fully engaged with what you do, um, unless you're coming from a place where you're really secure and you have the best relationship that you have with you in the world is with yourself.
I love
And
that.
if you are prioritizing, if you're prioritizing other relationships over yours, whether that's training, through training or other ways, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the people around you a disservice, I think, as well. But it's a fine line. I think, I use training to avoid these questions, which is really interesting. And I just was like, next goal, next goal, next goal. And I knew
Yeah.
that I was personally like, I was so uncomfortable without having a big goal ahead of me. And so, and even before I sort of came to this position of it comes from a place of self, that I was concerned about what would happen after this race. Because there's not much, this is as good as it's going to get for me in terms of opportunity, in terms of the support that I have to prepare for a race like this, that I have an amazing team around me, with my support crew and the general team on a larger level. This is essentially I'm doing this full time. There's not going to be an opportunity like this that I'll ever have again. And so I think you have to accept that journey becomes so much better if the relationship with self is as best as it can be.
And
But I
honest.
was concerned afterwards, like what would happen afterwards, and not the hole that I'd fall in, but more like where would I be emotionally, I guess. And I now know that question or that doubt about how I would be afterwards comes from a place of, well, if I've worked on myself well, it won't be a problem because you have that connection with yourself.
That's so important and a lesson for every athlete, and especially, the elite athletes who once retire almost, yeah, it's like, what's next? You know,
Yeah.
what do
And
I
and like
identify
you
as now?
Yeah, and it's just I don't think it's taught like at school or at any point where you go through everything in your life, and you might have the ups and downs of school, let's say the ups and downs of your 20s, all the different relationships you have with your family, people, and you've got people like older people in your family that pass away, your friends, a friend might pass away, you have jobs, you've got education, all these ups and downs, and like life is chaos, right? And there is suffering there to be had, but the one constant piece throughout that entire existence of your existence is your relationship is with you. That is the only thing that you've got that's consistent throughout the whole time. And so why not work on that? Why not treat that as a highest priority? Because then if you can get that, then it doesn't matter what happens, like you've still got that relationship. And
Yeah.
I think it's a yeah.
Yeah.
I've
You
just
got
found
you.
personally, yeah, exactly right. And so, but often we talk about that's selfish, or that's you've got to put others ahead of yourself. But I just don't think that's to be like, you don't want to be the person that it takes all the time for themselves, and then when it comes to others, they're still not a nice person. You really want to be a great person, but
Yeah, that's right.
um, I think you've got to know what it looks like for you to by putting yourself first in your own
Exactly.
space, to then be able to turn up in every other aspect of your life to be the best version of you as you can. So
Exactly. Yeah.
um, it's interesting because triathlon is probably one of the most selfish sports in the world, but it hasn't been that for me. Right? Like I've never. For me, it's been particularly obvious that I've never done this for myself. So it's to then turn that now to go, okay, this needs to be for you, and because of that journey, you're going to be the best version, like even a better version than anyone's ever known, because you've found that relationship with you. Then that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I'd definitely encourage everyone to look inward, and if there's
Yeah.
questions you need to ask yourself that you're shying away from, or that make you feel uncomfortable, like they're the questions that need to be answered, and it may take some time. And just to sit with your own self and to understand who you are, what you stand for, what you're about, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Very, very powerful and invaluable lesson. We could end it right here, but we won't. So I'm really interested to know, getting back to this sub 20 and your strategy around it.
Yep.
This term margin of safety, and I don't know where where it comes. Actually, I do know where it comes from. We got it from my husband, who works kind of, his hobby is shares and stuff, and they talk about the margin of safety for when you buy in, blah blah blah. In terms of your training,
Yep.
when the goal is sub 20, I mean, I've got no idea in terms of how you've got the guys who break down how many runs you should do, at what times you should be doing at, etc. Is there a margin of safety for, what happens on the day if it's raining, big waves? Like, there's so many variables on the day. How can you basically make sure that none of that matters, that you reach sub 20?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no guarantee, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to be safe. You've got to be like, people are like, oh, yeah, that should be, you'll be able to do that. And it's like, no, not necessarily. And
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, like it could be tumultuous waves or tides or rips or currents. And, or a car could hit me on the bike course, or we've got, spare bikes and wheels, but we could run through all of them. Or,
Yeah.
um, if my car, if if Renato rode off the car, which he wouldn't do, but if he crashed, which is not unheard of in the sport, if you crashed it and like what's yeah. So I guess in preparation of that, we have to just work on contingencies, as many contingencies as we can. But to be honest, we don't have a margin of safety. It's to a certain degree. Like we've run. So like in the swim, I guess the conditions are variable in the sense of tides. In Hawaii, I was more swim fit at the World Championships than I was the year before for the world record, and because of the tide, we were 20 minutes slower because the tide was against us in that swim. So that would be unfortunate if that happened in May, to put it bluntly. But the least of my concerns on an environmental basis, because it's such a long distance and you go every which way around the Sunshine Coast. If there's a headwind somewhere, there's a tailwind somewhere else, and that's okay. Obviously, the higher the winds, the greater the less light. Like that's not great. You'd want it to be still, because you're going to be stuck in a headwind longer than you're going to be pushed in a tailwind. But that's neither here nor there. It's more equipment issues, but we can work around that. We've got bikes and heaps of wheels, and that shouldn't be a problem. And then for the run, that's become. Well, we've run simulations on the bike, so there's software programs that you can run the course on based on your projected weight, which is really important, based on your projected power, and what your CDA is, or what your coefficient of drag is, how aerodynamic your whole position is. And you lay that over the conditions and the wind, and it spits out a time for each day. And so you work on that basis, and okay, I think I can reach this level of performance. And so what does that look like? And then that essentially then allows you to turn up on day 3 with a cumulative time of day 1 and 2. And you now know how fast you have to run to break 20 hours. And so I don't think part of me is certainly not, as I said at the start, like it's not about just breaking 20. It's about trying to find what's truly possible. So I've run, my running has to improve. And they're doing wholesale changes on that discipline. It needs to get so much better than it has been in the past. But if I've run 7 hours before, I've run a 6:50 in Hawaii for the double. But if we needed to run 7 hours to break 20 hours, let's say, on that last day, um, I'm still going to be trying to run to my potential. I wouldn't risk, you don't want to run to risk losing everything and, sort of blowing out in the back 40. But I'm not just going to sit and cruise just to break 20 hours. I really like the genesis of this was like, how fast can we go?
Yeah.
So we think under 20 is pretty cool, but that's not necessarily the end of it. We'll just see how that goes.
Yeah. I'd really love for you to break down your running gait. You've recently posted on Instagram that you're getting your gait assessed, and you mentioned to begin with, like it's about breaking everything down layer by layer, trying to be as efficient as possible. During that process, were there things that shocked you that you were maybe doing that you shouldn't be doing? Like, how different should you be running to what you have been,
Yeah,
or not at
heaps.
all? Oh,
No, no,
really?
no. And I was really hoping, like, obviously, the worst case scenario is you go, the run analysis coach goes, you run perfectly, and you're like, oh man, that's so. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, yeah,
I want the wholesale changes to happen, right? Because I want wholesale improvement.
yeah.
But no, it was, yeah. The premise of that is to go, all right, let's break that down into first principles and see. Let's learn to run again properly. And the general gist of it was that because of my hips and my, I guess, lack of engaged core, but more importantly, the lack of engaged hips, I sort of land well in front of my center of gravity. So that's essentially putting a halt, so putting a brake on, plus the impending problems with muscles and tendons that shock, that you're putting a leg in front. So I'm landing in front of my body essentially, which is not at all efficient or ideal. So, but it was exciting to know that, and the video shows that very, very clearly, and hopefully won't be too difficult to fix. But we thought we'd do that now before we go into crazy mileage and have that risk of injury. But I don't know. I just think there's something beautiful about approaching something with an amateur sort of mindset.
Absolutely.
And go, like don't be so proud that you think you know everything, but more importantly, go in thinking you know nothing, and
Exactly.
just absorb that as much as possible. And you have to be better for that process.
Oh, I love that. And oh my goodness, you've put the brakes on and you've been so successful already. What is the potential? Like, that's the
Yeah,
most exciting
that's
part.
yeah. The run for me, like that's what has limited me in the past. I mean, the sport in itself, Ultraman, is a very cycle based event, to the amount of kilometers versus or time in the bike compared to everything else. But I really want to put down a very, very, very handy double marathon time, and so I'm working hard to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's get back to your team, because you mentioned in the beginning that, you've got someone who's taking down, your times, what you should be running, whether you should be backing off. Like, how on earth does that work? Does he just stick his head out the window, like, "Oi, Rich, slow down," or "Go
Yeah,
faster"? Like, how
exactly.
does this work?
So great. So what's happened in the past is absolutely that. So we have a plan, an overall number. We work on, especially on the bike, we work on power and essentially feeling, like perceived effort. And so we'll have a plan to hit. And let's say the first hour, I've got to hit this number. And so every time they roll around, he lines out of the window and says, "What's your number?" And I'll tell him, and he'll be like, "Good." And then he'll write that number. For whatever reason, they like to write it on the windscreen.
Oh, yeah.
So he writes it on the windscreen and ticks that off. And then obviously, as the day progresses, fatigue creeps and the task is more difficult. And also, like, I don't, like in Ironman, as I said, like, you have to control that yourself. That whatever power plan you've got, or heart rate plan, or intensity plan, that's up to you to control. So I forget obviously what's going on. So I'm just given half an hour jobs. So in the next half hour, you've got to hold this number. So I, press my computer and it laps it and refreshes the numbers. And then he comes by and says, what's your number? I tell him, and he's like, all right, that's okay. That's a little bit too heavy, or that's a bit too low. Can you increase it, for example? He's amazing at it. He'll say that he gets nervous, really nervous throughout those 2 days or those 3 days because it's up to him and I'm following his orders to the T. So that rests with him, but he does an amazing job at it. And for the world record, we had just in 2017, so we're on debut. We have no idea what we're doing. Day 2, I was in third on the bike for a while, and then I dropped the other 2 riders. So I'm in the lead, and if it was up to me, it would have been we still have, I think I had 150 kilometers to ride and 160 kilometers to ride. And if it was up to me, I'm like, let's go now. We had just hit the lead. Let's rock this ship up. And he came around. He's like, what's your number? And I was like, I don't know, this, whatever it was, 230 or 240. And he was like, that's too high. You need to slow down. And I was like, and he told, it was essentially like a 10% drop in intensity for an hour. And I was like, it was the first time that I was like, can you just check that, please? I feel pretty good. I don't think we should back off. I think we should keep going. And he's like, he comes back and goes, oh, no, definitely hold back for another hour. So I was like, okay. So we did that. And it just proved so well because it meant that you're fresh at the end and, you can really rock it, really, really ride hard in the final hour of that bike ride. So you just couldn't do it without them.
Wow.
All of them is just, and it's difficult for me to claim the victory or when I say that we won the world championships, because that's it's nice in an Ironman. I mean, but it's still you as the athlete. But for me, I'm like, you've got the whole team, but there's no way that you could do that physically, let alone well, without a really good team around you. So,
where will your team be when you're approaching the finish line?
So for the Sub20 challenge, that's at Noosa. And so at Noosa, they've got a special, differential that in the final kilometre, it runs along Noosa Main Beach. And so they will get out of the car and join me for that final kilometre to run down the beach to the finish line, which is cool. Yeah. But for next year's race, it's all very professional. We've got microphones and it's all dialed into the car, and all my numbers will show up on their computers instantly, and he can radio messages to me into my ear, and it's all pretty snazzy.
Yeah, sensational. Just quickly, tell us about your recovery. How do you recover, and how have you honed that over the years?
That's I think bigger picture thing than the actual training or the actual racing, because that's what's allowing you to get into the best place possible to perform. And it is, when you get into it, you realize that everything that you do in recovery or when you're not training is either going towards feeling better for the next session or going away from it. And that's okay. I enjoy a glass of wine and a piece of chocolate as well. I'm not certainly the Boy Scout in that respect, but it's just that awareness that everything that you're doing is either going towards recovery or it's going against it. And so things that I would do as non-negotiables on a daily basis, which essentially then folds into the race in between the stages, is things like getting enough sleep. This sleep is just so critical, and in general life, there's so much amazing research out there to say that you really do need 8 hours. And that comes back to the position of self-love and self-respect, that it's you could just watch another movie or watch another television show, but you're choosing to for yourself to go to bed early and to get 8 hours, because it's so worthwhile to do that on an athletic level, but also just on a health level. So sleep's really important, and there's a lot of variables within sleep in terms of temperature, what you're eating before bed, what time you do, the consistency of the time that you go to sleep, when you last drink caffeine, when you last drink alcohol, lots of variables. But you play around with that. You work out what's best for you and what's going to get you the best sleep for your night. Other things like protein and just really good eating. I work closely with Scott Tyndall at Fuelin, who's my nutritionist, and he's a believer in just good whole food, really high protein, but also really high carbohydrate, especially when you're training so much. And other things like, I get a massage every week. I see physio almost every week. And when I'm, it's like Normatec recovery, like the recovery boots and the self massage, and then it's I don't know. Now I like rattle that off. I feel like I'm obsessive with it, but it's just part of what I do, and it's just, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, I think, and and the more you do it, and so I think it grows naturally. Like, you start off with good eating and good sleep, and then it's like, okay, maybe I do want to drink 2 liters of water a day outside of training, or maybe I want that water to be filtered, or what's the research about, about massage on a weekly basis, or, and you just follow that curiosity, and it takes you to some pretty amazing places.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should be doing a lot of that. You are spending time on yourself, and um, again, it is helping you experience your potential, full potential, whatever
Yeah,
that could be. So
but
super.
I think as soon as an athlete, or, if they're even for a person's job, like if there are 2 parts to your job, like in view and triathlon or endurance sport, where there's the actual physical work and then the recovery, why would you only focus on one when it's the other? The other is they're so interconnected, and one absolutely, like, recovery will absolutely allow you to perform at your best effort the next day for training. Why would you skip on that? Like, why wouldn't you go
Yeah.
down that path? Because training is just not enough. You need to be able to recover well. The idea is that you're trying to turn up on day 3 to run a double marathon feeling like you've done nothing, and turn up on day 2 like you haven't swum 10 kilometers and ridden 145k. So that's, and there's no way you're going to go, oh yeah, I'll do all that recovery when the race happens.
Mm,
It just won't happen. So you've got to be able
exactly.
to work out what works best for you, and really hone it.
Exactly. Super important, and something that is unfortunate. I think people feel like they do have to put all the work in, which is the training, and put all the time and energy into that. And it is, unfortunately, it's really common that the recovery does get put to one side. I'm not sure why, but like you said, if you want to be performing, to your best ability and feel good, then that's part of training. That's part of the program. And interestingly, I was chatting with Tessa, who I have interviewed. By the way, I've set up an interview with Julian and Tessa about
Oh,
their
awesome.
experience. So that's fantastic. But she was saying that you've provided the program and have included some foam rolling in there, which she now feels like she has to do because
Yeah.
it's in the
There's that.
program, right?
Well,
But if it
maybe I
wasn't
should do
there,
all of it then, right? Yeah.
but I really love that. And so let's talk a bit about your coaching, because I find that really interesting. Firstly, you've learnt lots of different techniques since having started.
Yeah.
How do you hone like the best methods for athletes of different levels? Like, how do you pick and choose from your toolbox what's going to be the best approach for different people?
Yeah, I think we started T0 Multisport on the premise that, in my experience at least, there were coaches back in, and I started coaching 10 years ago now, but there were coaches out there that were really good at the art of coaching, And there were some coaches, they're not great with the personal sort of connection. They were just like, sorry, the art of coaching, that they were great with the personal, but didn't really look into the data or the science behind it. And then there were some great coaches that were great at the science, but were really terrible people, like couldn't manage people or couldn't really communicate well with people. So we thought that there'd be a wonderful opportunity to provide a service that is both the art and the science. And that's what I guess lean on to this day in terms of understanding how to get the best out of people. And so everyone does start with a different set of facts and a different history and different strengths and weaknesses and different goals, especially, and different, different balls in the air, different responsibilities. So it's a process of just listening initially and understanding where they come from as a human, and what their goals are. It's the same process that I take. Like personally, you work in to understand what that goal is. They might say, I want to let's say they want to finish an Ironman or finish an Ultraman. That's it. And it's like, well, okay. That's not just the goal though, because you want to do that with a particular athlete, let's say an amateur athlete. You want to do that with keeping your responsibilities in check, right? You don't want to lose your job. You don't want to lose your family by just virtue of that goal. So let's broaden that goal and go, okay, you want to finish the Ultraman, but you want to do it because you want to do it to enjoy the journey. So it's beneficial for you whilst it's complementing your current life and current life responsibilities. So great, we've got that position. And then it's like, well, and then you don't necessarily just want to finish it either, because I had this experience where I had an athlete who wanted to finish her first, she hadn't done an Ironman before and wanted to do her first Ironman. And she said, I just want to finish. And so, okay. And her run was probably her weakest. And she was very much of a sort of back of the packer, just wanted to do it, tick it off. And I was like, cool. All right. So she gave me 12 months to prepare her to do the Ironman. And we got, in that first 6 months, we just basically did swimming and riding. Did a little bit of running, but the focus was on swim bike. And we got to Christmas, or got halfway through, and I was like, right, we're ready to go now. Because she's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we literally just swam 4 kilometers in the pool. You just rode out of the pool and rode 180 kilometers. This was your time, total time, right, with the traffic and everything. And the cutoff in Ironman is 17 hours, and anyone can walk a marathon in 7 hours. So you can just walk it in. And she was like, oh, yeah, but I don't just want to finish. I don't just want to walk the marathon. And I was like, exactly, right? Like, you don't want to just finish anything. Everyone's sort of, I think, sparked by this idea that they genuinely want to see what's possible within their confines of their conditions or their responsibilities, whilst keeping everything afloat and happy. And so I think the beauty of it is that you get everyone is so different in that space that then dictates how I then physically set the program. And you could have someone who doesn't have children who wants to win a race or wants to do very, very well, but at the end of the day, they're still wanting to achieve their best outcome. Same motivation as someone who's got 3 kids, a full-time job, and 3 households to deal with, but the confines are much shorter, but the motivation is still there. It's still exactly the same. They still want to achieve the very best for them that's possible within their realm of their life. So that motivates me. And then from there, you then filter out the program to suit their life and what their responsibilities are, and keeping obviously in the end game of what their actual goal is for the sport. And then that's the science. Then the science comes into it, and to go, okay, let me see this data. I believe, based on what you've told me, this sort of stimulus might work as fast as possible. Like, that'll give us the biggest bang for our buck, I guess you call it, the most impact. And then if that doesn't happen, or if that stagnates a little bit, then it's like, okay, we need to change that stimulus swim, bike, run across the board, whatever it is, to keep your body improving within the space of time that you've allowed us to train. That could be 30 hours, that could be 10. But it's a continual movement of that. Like, you don't want to plateau. And then there's also this element of understanding fatigue and understanding how tired an athlete is. And that does take time with the athlete. And the athlete has to sort of, especially with athletes who are new to Ultraman, the whole level of fatigue bit is a really big question as to what's a good level of fatigue and what's an unhealthy level of fatigue. And there's tools that we can use to really signify whether or not we're in the red too much. But if we are, then, and like with Tess and Julian have found that they recover at completely different rates. And so, and the correct answer is the true answer. So you just say, well, there's no point in worrying that someone else recovers faster, because all you can worry about is yourself. And once you've recovered, we can get going again. And that's that process of letting go a little bit of that comparison, I think, is to let go of that and just understand that it's just you on this journey. But yeah, that's how I coach. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's for Ultraman, it's cool. Like, I love it. I love coaching athletes to Ultraman because it's, I don't know, the variables are much more controlled than an Ironman
Yeah,
race.
right. Tell us, what do you do when you have an athlete who gets in touch and is just like, I'm beat. I don't know if I can do this.
They email me and say that, or they call me and say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Has
I
that
would dig
happened?
into that. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And a lot of the times, there's everyone has doubts, right?
Yeah.
Especially for Ultraman. But for anything, someone who might have doubts that they can run a 5K park run, but you need to. I think that's where it comes back to that relationship with self, and you work with that athlete, and you go, okay, where is that insecurity coming from, right? Which part of, like, what does that feel like? Where are you feeling it? What does it feel like? That doubt, um, and um, and part of that is that might be on me as well for not providing that level of encouragement and my athletes will absolutely tell you that I'm not someone to give too many compliments, because I take my job pretty seriously, and I like people sign up to get them to do that job, and for me it falls on my shoulders whether or not they are successful or not, and so there is no other variables other than what my job is, and so but if an athlete is doubtful, then you go, okay, let me show you what I see where there is no doubt. If there is doubt on my behalf, and I'm like, oh, I don't know whether this is possible, what your goal is based on where we are, then I will tell them as soon as I think, if I feel that, and it might be the athlete that says, I want to win this race, or I want to do this time, but I've got all these responsibilities, but I think it'll be fine. And then 3 months into a 12-month program, it's obvious to me that the responsibilities are getting in the way. And that's fine, because no one does this without responsibilities outside of the sport. But it's an honest conversation to say, okay, this is why, I mean, personally, I don't really like external goals by themselves to go, I want to win this race, or I want to break a particular time, even though I appreciate I've got this Sub20, which is at odds with that. But I think it's important to motivate you, to get you out of bed, to go, I want to break 12 hours for the Ironman. Like, that's what's motivating me to get out of bed, or I want to win this race, or whatever it is. But the genesis of the feeling must come from within, and must be like, I want to do the very best that I can possibly do. And that's what we have to always come back to, is that potential. And if there is doubt, yeah, I show them what I see. If I don't have any doubt in that athlete's ability, I mean, Tess, she won't have a problem with me saying this, but she had a lot of doubts as well. She had a lot of doubts on her bike. And so I was able to show her what I see, extrapolate that out into the race, and that's calmed her right down, and she can accept that. She can see it, because it's so difficult for an athlete, particularly when you are, 5-6 months into preparing. You are so tired. I'm just giving you, like an 8-hour bike ride on the weekend, and you're like, I'm so tired. and I'm much slower than I thought I was, and it's like, and then they get doubts, and that's okay. I think doubts is also when you've got something to lose. That's when you get doubtful, and so it's a good thing sometimes to go, yeah, we've put a lot of energy into this journey, and we want to make sure this works well. But as I said, I take that responsibility probably far too seriously as a coach.
Well, that's what they come to you for, right?
Yeah, but the beauty about Ultraman as well is that I can, like with Tessa's team and with Julian's team, over those 3 days, as it's happening, I get fed the information, the data from their team, and I communicate with their team captains as to what they should do now. If there needs to be a change of plan based on what we had in the morning. And so each night I'll speak to them and the team captain to work out how that day went. I'll be able to see the data that's been uploaded. We'll be able to create a plan as a result of that for the next day. And then during that day, if something needs to change, we change it on the fly. I relay that to the captain. The captain then tells to Tess or Julian, for example, and then to essentially get them to the finish line as fast as possible. So that, as a coach, is a really unique opportunity to have.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's a full-on weekend. It's a full-on weekend,
Yeah.
and because I might expect them to be at a certain level physically, and on day one comes, they get through that, and they're like, okay, the plan didn't work out, or I felt a bit tired, or that was too easy. Then we can change the plan for the next day, and yeah, as I said, change it on the fly as well, which has had to happen in the past. Athletes go out way too fast, and it's like, we need to rein this back in really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible. What do you encourage your athletes to do in terms of their recovery?
I think it starts with good food choices and sleep. They're the two primary focus points for me on general recovery. I also like to make sure that they've got a really good allied health team like yourself, and just to have that almost as a prehab work, do some prehab work, um, is ideal because of the amount of work that's necessary to ensure that we don't break down. Because an athlete, like my job is sort of continually like a risk management, because to get someone to run faster, you run them heaps, right? You could run them 150 kilometers a week, ideally. But that's what but no one's going to do that, because you're going to break down, and you're going to not have time for anything else. But so every week that I program, it's this risk management of, is this going to be too much for the body? This intensity, this duration, this type of stimulus, swim, bike, run, make sure they all marry up, plus the strength work. And if there's an element of the need for recovery, we need to look into that quickly. It's always better to have 2 days off to fully recover than 2 weeks off feeling absolutely busted. But yeah, I think good food, good hydration, good sleep, and a good allied health team is critical to achieving that.
And you mentioned prehab. What does that mean?
Prehab for me, I like sort of getting an athlete in for working on, not, you call it strength and conditioning or strength and mobility, but working on the small areas of deficiencies within their body. So I would always look at getting a qualified physio. The best case scenario is, I think, like reformer Pilates with a qualified physio, to break it, slow it right down, to look at those deficiencies, bring in someone looking at your run gait, looking at your range of motion with running. It's probably the running side of things is probably the biggest. Obviously, it's the biggest risk factor of the three sports. So that's always the forefront of my mind. Is like, you just don't want someone to get stress fractures or overuse injuries, because they just kill the preparation. You have this macro plan, everything, like you don't plan on an injury, because that's obviously, but just getting the small things right, core, foam roller work at home, massage, just all of that contributes to prehab work, so that you don't, a proper warm up in all sports dry land work and swimming, TheraBand work, so your shoulders and arms are all ready to go before you jump in. Small things that they do take time, and I appreciate not everyone's got that, but then you scratch your head as to why you got injured, and it's like, well, it's probably
Yeah. Exactly, that might be it.
yeah,
I mean, when you're committing to something so huge, why wouldn't you take the time to make sure that you stay injury free?
yeah, exactly, exactly.
This has been so sensational, and I could keep talking to you
No,
for
that's all good.
days. But before we finish this off, you are documenting your journey. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the short story is there's a feature length documentary being made about me and this journey and trying to break 20 hours, all whilst under the, handling, being a dad to three boys, running, helping run a business, coaching athletes, and all the other things that are involved. So, um, yeah, the general story is that my son's kindy teacher was a part-time filmmaker, and I talked to her about what we're trying to achieve, and what this is a couple of years ago now, and the idea that the crew's involved and what they bring to the table as people, because they're just such wonderful men, those four guys. Um and she was like, oh, this could be a pretty cool documentary. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not the most public. I don't like the idea of being so public, but I do like the idea of a story helping people, right? And helping others, like a general premise of a story, helping a lot of people. And I don't, as I said, I don't think I'm that special as an athlete. And I certainly don't think I'm that worthy of a documentary, but it's that sort of progressed now to become like probably Australia's best, most awarded sports documentary director in Melbourne, Marcus Kolodic. He's directing. One of Australia's largest production houses are producing it. And we've got film, like cinema distribution of Mad Men are already endorsing it, and into streaming services after that. So it's been a lot of work, but it's just grown so far beyond what I thought was what was going to happen. And it just means that, yeah, a lot of times there's a camera around, and a lot of really like a lot of video diary work. So a lot of me just talking into a camera, and which is really really confronting and emotional. But it's for the greater good, and you only live once, so you may as well grab it both
So
ways.
you may as well document it.
You may as well document it. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Whether we succeed or not, goodness me, who knows? But
Oh
let's
gosh, I
hope let's
guess
hope it's
you're a success already. Like you said right at the beginning, it's been about the process all along. And
yeah,
I think when you come out of something learning so much more about yourself, I think that's a huge win in itself, because that's life changing.
yeah.
So I'm so excited to even see this. When can we expect it? Because I know you're not running this year. When are you competing, and tell us about when it will be released.
Yeah, so the race schedule is pretty limited because of how difficult, how tiring these races are. But we're doing sort of like a half version. It's called Ultra 355 at Harvey Bay in Queensland in August. We're going to go to Hawaii for the World Championships at the end of this year, which is really exciting. I didn't think I'd had a chance to go back there, so we're going to do that, and the whole film crew is going over there, so that's going to be manic. And then the actual race is May 2023, so essentially in a year's time. And then I'm reliably informed that the film will be available, will be ready to be released in sort of October, November, December, maybe Boxing Day release in cinemas next year. So yeah, it's crazy because I'm nowhere near as fit as I need to be right now. But that's okay. I've been working on the small
You got
things,
12
and
months.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's a cool opportunity to have, and yeah, I think the lesson that's certainly appearing at the moment is working for people, to encourage people to work on that relationship with self and to see what true beauty can be in life, and true potential can come from that when you come from a place of, you know, a real peace within yourself.
Bloody awesome. This has been so fantastic. Richard, thank you so much. If people want to follow
Thank you.
your journey and get in touch about some coaching, how can they do that?
Okay, so my Instagram is Richard Thompson Triathlon. And that's the only social media that I use. And,
That's it.
that's it. The Sub20 challenge, the Kangaroo Sub20 challenge website is where you get all the information on that. The video diaries, there's a lot of content that I put on through that about the journey, sort of like a behind the scenes. That's at kangaroosub20challenge.com.au. Or if you just Google Sub20 challenge, that'll be also fine. And the coaching is t0multisport.com. We've got an amazing group of about 12 coaches who run by the same philosophy as I do with their coaching. And as long as the athlete is truly committed and want to find what their absolute potential is within their life and within their responsibilities, then they're so committed. We take it, you know, really seriously, and we love doing what we do. So t0multisport.com for the coaching.
Amazing. I'll have all of that in the show notes. Richard, I'd like to finish off these interviews with something the listeners can take away and apply to, whether it's their training or their life straight away. And so with this last question, what is one strategy that people can use when they're in the hurt locker, so to speak? So whether it's a 7-hour ride, a 5-hour run, whatever it is, they're struggling, they want to quit. What is your best advice for them in that moment?
The mantra that I lean on is, this is where you want to be. And it's to remind myself that it's in the discomfort that creates the currency or the value of the experience. And so going back to that lady who could walk the marathon, you can walk a marathon, but if that's really comfortable for you, you're not going to get a lot out of it. And so as soon as you realize that in anything that you do, the value of that experience is directly related to the discomfort or the sacrifice, then you open your eyes and you realize that hurt locker or that discomfort is exactly what you want, because that's providing the experience and the richness to that experience.
That's so powerful. So it's almost like we're chasing discomfort.
We have to be. We are. And the idea of discomfort in a lot of people's mind is a negative. But that's only because that's how society is looking at it. That's how you've been programmed it. But if you look at it as an actual like sacrifice or discomfort as a positive, if you tell me anything that you've achieved in your life, Jackie, that hasn't come from sacrifice or discomfort, you're not going to find much, because it's not valuable to you.
Exactly.
So when you are in that position, whether it's cycling, running, whether it's, you know, doing that last brief for your boss or whatever it is, there's value in it. And therefore you need to look at it and go, yeah, I'm here. This is exactly where I want to be, because this creates the value of the experience.
So powerful. Richard, thank you so much. This has been sensational.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
That was Ultraman world champion and world record holder Richard Thompson, with everything it takes to prepare not only himself but his team for the extraordinary goal of a sub-20 Ultraman. And what I loved most about this chat is that whilst this is an exciting goal he's set out to achieve, it's so much more than figuring out how to physically break the sub-20 hours, but it's also about self-discovery and really stripping back what he thinks he knows and adopting that beginner's mindset. And you would have heard us talking about a couple of athletes that Richard has coached and I have worked with throughout their recovery process to their first Ultraman Tessa Moorfield and Julian Bennett. I chat with them next week, and it's an episode first for me because I did this interview in 2 takes, a pre-race interview and a post-race interview. And we did that so we could get a true feel and representation of what training was like and where their headspace was at pre and post-race. So stay tuned for that one. In the meantime, make sure you head over to the Kangaroo Sub20 Challenger website where Richard keeps his diary entries as to how he's going throughout this incredible journey. If you found this episode valuable, please like it, share it with your friends, and of course subscribe because it all helps this little podcast going strong. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate you. Have the best day, week, month and year, and here is to a world of bodies built better.